Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Boucher, Executive Editor at Event Marketer Magazine, and welcome to today's webinar, the 2021 Partner Imperative, 5 Reasons Why DIY Events Won't Cut It This Year. So over the next hour, we're going to address the questions, obstacles, and growing pains of pulling off a digital experience in this new era of events when budgets and resources are tight and you're finding yourself making decisions about what to bring in-house and how and when to secure a strategic professional partnership for your virtual event management. It's certainly a debate Suez, Water Technologies and Solutions, has had, and one Smart Source has been able to help clients navigate. And we've assembled a panel from both sides to talk about a virtual case study, to hear about what Suez learned and how Smart Source supported the entire endeavor along the way. We'll be taking your questions throughout, so feel free to pop them into the Q&A tab as you think of them. And you'll also be taking part in a couple of polls as we move along as well. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce Cindy McElhaney, Trade Show and Event Marketing Specialist at Suez Water Technologies and Solutions. Hi, Cindy.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Mikey Moran, National Project Manager at Smart Source. Hi, Mikey.
Hi, great to be here.
And Sydney Janetta, Life Sciences Product Application Specialist, Analytical Instruments Division at Suez. And Sydney is a seasoned speaker, and she's going to weigh in on a hot topic in virtual events this year, the importance of speaker prep. So hi, Sydney.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get started. Cindy, tell us about Suez Water Technologies and Solutions and the live event that you transitioned to digital to set the stage.
Sure thing. So Suez is a leading water technology company. We have 10,000 employees around the globe, and Sydney and I work for the Analytical Instruments Division. We manufacture instrumentation that tests and monitors water for organic contaminants. And what that really means is that we test drinking water, municipal drinking water, we test pharmaceutical water and drug manufacturing to make sure that it meets or exceeds government standards and that it's clean and safe for use for whatever the particular use is. So as for the event, it was a product launch for one of our water analyzers. It had not been updated in 10 years, and it was going to be our flagship event of the year. It was supposed to be in person with people flying in from all over the world into Boulder, where our office is located. And we had already sent out a save the date. We had done our site tours. We were close to a contract with a local hotel, and that's when COVID hit. So we pretty much readily knew that we were going to have to transition to virtual because this was such an important event for us. We weren't going to cancel it. That wasn't an option. So I had never done a virtual event before, and nobody in our company had. And I'm sort of guessing that a lot of people on this call today perhaps have not done a virtual event either before last year. So it was a whole new world to me and to us. But as an event planner, I am used to pivoting and adapting. We all do. We all have to do things on the fly, and things change all the time. So that's what I did. I just kind of mentally shifted and said, okay, this is what we're going to do, and started to go in that direction. And as far as the event itself, we had 12 hours of content. It needed to be presented virtually to our audience, and we decided to split that up into 3-hour days for 3 hours a day for 4 days, and that would give people enough time every day to go back to their regular jobs, check their email, deal with their kids, whatever they had going on, and also would break up the material into digestible chunks. So we ended up presenting that material twice a day, 3 hours in the morning and again 3 hours in the evening, and that would accommodate all of the time zones that we had to reach. The attendees themselves were made up of our sales team, of our channel partners, of our field service technicians, and of anyone else in the business who we thought would benefit from learning about the new product. And so once that structure was solidified and all the basic pieces were in place, I started to create my big list of things to do, and I started to dive in.
And Mikey, how about talking about Smart Source's involvement?
Yeah, when we first got involved, obviously superficially, it was a product launch, and I've done quite a few product launches. I mean, every event is unique, but I initially approached this as a product launch. But as I worked with Cindy and got to get accustomed with their need for this particular event, we were able to take her ask and translate it into something that would work with the vocab of virtual events. Because I always like to say that With virtual, it's not so much about converting a live event as it is translating it into a live event, because things that work in live don't always work in virtual and vice versa. So we're able to take her ask and translate into something that would really carry over a virtual event.
Nice. Yeah. So before we move on, I do want to launch that first poll. Here it is. What is your biggest challenge in planning virtual events? Select an answer, and we'll get to the results in just a minute. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of partnerships. Cindy, how did SmartSource add value to the event?
So they were a huge partner for me and for us. It wasn't long into planning that I realized that I did not have the skill set needed to manage this event from a technical or production standpoint. So that's when I started to look outside for a third-party vendor to help me with those portions of it. I did look at several options. I looked at several different vendors and platforms and applications. And for me, SmartSource stood out far and above as the vendor to go with, because many reasons. One of it was their attention to me and my needs. Some of the other folks that I met with were really focused on telling me about themselves, and SmartSource was really interested in learning about me and my business and my event. And they also had a la carte options, which allowed me to pick and choose what I needed. So, for example, I didn't need a registration page and I didn't need breakout sessions, so I didn't have to pay for those things. I just paid for the pieces that I needed. So just knowing that I had their support really and had them on board as a partner was a huge sense of relief for me. Just knowing that I wasn't going to be doing this thing alone, that was a huge load off my mind. And then practically speaking, they provided me a list of deliverables early on, and it had a timeline, and that really helped me get organized and set my internal deadlines so that I could meet their deadlines. They were also super patient with me and my team. We did have 13 speakers for our event, and we held a bi-weekly speaker rhythm call just to answer speakers' calls or questions and get them comfortable with everything. So I was the conduit between SmartSource and the speakers for the most part, but then SmartSource did jump in and answer our speakers' questions directly. They attended some of our internal calls, and that was super helpful, and they were super patient with everybody's questions. And then most important, of course, they just elevated the event to a level that we could have never reached without a professional production arm and somebody keeping track of time and all the technicalities. They just they brought it to a whole new level.
Yeah. Mikey?
Thanks, Sydney. I appreciate that. From our perspective, I mean, we loved all the questions. It was great having such a clear picture of what you guys were trying to accomplish. We don't always get that right out the gate, so that was really excellent. She brought up those speaker rhythm calls. That was huge for me too, because it allowed your presenters to kind of put a face to a name and know that I'm here to help support you. So when I actually started working with people like Sydney, it was that much easier to start collaborating with your team because they'd seen me before. So that was a huge thing for me and something that I still encourage now.
Yeah, I think we forget about that, the importance of that relationship in the partnership. And in person, you might be having a lot of FaceTime with somebody, but all those conversations that you would have in the in-person are just as important, right, in the virtual space. So let's take a look at those poll results now. Okay, so biggest challenge in planning virtual events, 43% say attracting and engaging attendees. That's their biggest pain point. So we'll talk about that in a minute. 29% said lack of technological expertise, which is pretty timely, an interesting answer considering what we're talking about today. Budgeting came in at 16% and finding an end-to-end solution at 12%. And I do think the budget's kind of an important topic to discuss. Cindy, can you tell me about how did you help the business understand the importance and justify the expense of hiring an outside vendor? I think that's a tricky, place to navigate from your end.
Sure. So first thing I did was I spoke with management to just make sure I understood what the goals were, and that nothing had changed from an in-person event to the virtual version, meaning that the goal was still to have our attendees learn the product, be comfortable about it, be knowledgeable about it, have the technical information that they needed so that after the event, they were ready and excited and prepared to go out and sell it. So once I had an understanding that that was still what they were trying to accomplish in a virtual format, I really just had three reasons that I, but three legitimate reasons as to why I did need to hire SmartSource. And the first was that I explained the things that I just told you a minute ago, which is that I don't have the technical expertise and I don't have the production expertise. And if I was tasked with those things, I would be spending all of my time and energy on those, getting ready for that part of the event, as opposed to the marketing pieces, which is where my expertise lied. And so by hiring a third party, I was able to still focus on the event itself, making sure it had the good vibe that we wanted it to have, that it had solid content, that we had time to get things like a product video ready and the new marketing materials, the brochures. All of those things had to be done. And if I had been focusing on that other stuff, I wouldn't have had time to get those basic marketing needs accomplished. So that was huge, and they really understood that. Secondly, I put together a short presentation showing all of the different vendors that I did look at and why I was recommending that we go with SmartSource. So I did show them that I did my due diligence. I wasn't just picking someone out of thin air. I did do some research. And then finally, I reminded them that any money we spent on a vendor would be a lot less than the cost of meals, hotels, outings, all of the things we were planning to spend our money on for the in-person event. And so that part went over well. They really understood that piece of it.
And Mikey, choosing a streaming platform can be overwhelming, and we saw some of those results in the poll that we just had. So in this case, Suez had global audiences to engage. Can you talk about the challenges of this scenario and how SmartSource implemented a plan A and plan B to accommodate all attendees?
Yeah, absolutely. Every virtual event we do, what your audience actually winds up watching is always kind of a complicated question. There's a million ways to do it, utilizing web conferencing platforms or video streaming platforms. And that's honestly a big part of why you should reach out to a vendor, because it's our job to kind of keep up with these things and make sure that we can find the best compromise for your event, because it's not always the perfect solution. It's the best solution given all the variables for your particular event. And this event's a really good example. Cindy mentioned that we were doing the show twice a day, and the evening event, one of the largest markets for that particular version was China. And China has a number of restrictions on the internet, and a lot of web conferencing and streaming platforms such as Teams and YouTube and Vimeo are actually blocked on Chinese internet. Cindy was able to select a web conferencing platform that does work in China, that Suez Water Technology and Solutions owns a license for, and they have some familiarity with. But the downside was that the video quality wasn't really up to something like, say, a YouTube Live or a Vimeo live stream. So I set up a backup stream for this event to make available to people outside of China, and Cindy was able to share that with her audience. That really came in handy because on the second day of the event, there was an issue with the web conferencing platform that does work in China where we could not turn on the camera to show the production video for some reason. We tried everything. We changed computers, restarted everything, but we just could not get video access. So Cindy was able to pivot her audience to the Vimeo stream that was already ready to go. And
yeah.
It was huge.
So engaging speakers are essential to delivering effective presentations. This has been a new area of expertise for a lot of companies. Delivering through a screen requires a different set of skills in many cases, right? So what are your top tips to help speakers prepare? And Mikey, I'll kick it to you first.
Sure. The biggest thing is just always that, we're here to support you. I think some people might have had bad experiences in the past. So we always try to emphasize that, myself and my production team are really here to help you do your absolute best. We make an emphasis that we're not going to rush you. Take your time. You've scheduled enough time that we could do this all the way through 2 or 3 times, and that's something that we encourage with customers too. It's a delicate balance, but we provide feedback and guidance to the presenters when it's appropriate. At the end of the day, it's not my call whether that was the good take or not, but we do have the advantage of seeing a lot of these, and we kind of tend to know what's going to work and what doesn't. So sometimes we'll gently suggest, maybe, I think we might have heard a little something on your microphone. Maybe we want to think about doing that one more time, as opposed to hurting someone's confidence by saying their pacing was off. Another major thing, we used SmartSource's professional presentation kits on this job, which is a laptop, an external webcam on a stand, and a microphone. And I also have the ability to control those laptops remotely. So if there's any issues with them, or if anything needs to be changed or adjusted, me or a member of my team are able to actually log into that. So the presenters don't even have to worry about the technical end of things. All they have to do is make sure the computer's on and focus on doing their presentation as best they can.
I love that. Takes the pressure off. It's one less thing for them to have to worry about. They can focus on what they need to be doing. So
yeah, we love it too.
Yeah. So Sydney, this is your area of expertise. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Smart Source was a big help in all of this. When it comes to speaking in general on a virtual platform, it can be really challenging. You aren't talking to a live audience, you're talking to your computer basically. So you're not getting that interaction and that feedback that you would normally get from a live in-person event. So the biggest tips that I have are practice. Just like you would practice for your live event, practice for your virtual event. We have great resources out there nowadays. You can use like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, or even potentially present it to a spouse or a friend to really help you get comfortable with your material. With Microsoft Teams, that's what I've been using. I can time my presentation so I can see exactly how long it will take me to get through my material. And I can also see where I might be stumbling. So a slide that might catch me off guard, or I'm not getting through very smoothly, and it allows me to practice exactly what I want to say. It's just very helpful, and it gives you that chance to even listen to yourself back. A lot of times when you're talking to your computer and it's not very personable, you can find that your voice might get really monotone, and that can be really hard for attendees to listen to. And so being able to listen to yourself back in that practice session really allows you to create a more personable experience for your audience. The other thing I would recommend as a tip is to use your speaker notes. At the bottom of the PowerPoint templates, they have that wonderful section to add notes for each slide. And when we worked with Smart Source, they had those up on the screen during our pre-recordings. It made it really easy to stay on top of what we needed to be talking about, and allowed us to get right back on track if we went down a different path during that conversation. So those are my biggest tips: practice, 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 and use your speaker notes. They're really easy. They're there to help you. And it's just overall, it's a good benefit and a good practice, especially in this virtual world.
Cindy?
Yeah, all good stuff from Mikey and Sydney. A couple other things I would just recommend. One is that I would remind speakers that their presentation decks need to be high level, meaning that their bullet points on the screen don't need to include tons of text. They should really just have the key talking points. And that way the audience is more inclined to listen to what they're saying instead of trying to read all of the text that might be on the screen. And then also along those same lines, to just ensure that their text is large, and especially to make images and graphics on the screen as large as possible so that they're legible to the audience. That's something that I see time and again, that too much text on the screen. So I hammer that home with my team all the time, and they're learning. They're getting much better at it. I'd also encourage speakers to just go ahead and ask whatever their questions are that they need to be sure that they're 110% comfortable with the technology, because they don't want to have any questions or glitches on the day of, and we want to make sure that they're focused on the delivery and the content and the timing.
Yeah. I've got a question rolling in. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. Thanks, Robbie. And Marie said that was a great idea. So some good ideas regarding the speaker prep and those kinds of things in our last segment here. So another big debate for event marketers in the virtual realm is whether to pre-record or run presentations live. I think everybody's had this debate this year. In this case, the main presentations were pre-recorded with live Q&A offered. Why was that choice made, and what was that process like? Mikey, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, Cindy called me up when we still had a few months to go and said that she was interested in pre-recording the main sessions instead of doing it live, and that was music to my ears. That was great news. There's a lot of practical considerations in terms of things that can go wrong when doing things strictly live. I mean, your internet can go out, your camera can fall off your computer, your cat will jump on your keyboard, anything can happen and has. I mean, ask me sometime. I've seen some amazing things that have happened on live sessions. But just in general, it really is a best practice. I like to encourage customers that for anything that doesn't absolutely have to be live, like question and answer or housekeeping that requires up-to-the-minute information, I always recommend pre-recording as much as possible. And I do believe that there's kind of a misconception when it comes to virtual events with live versus pre-recorded, that a live presentation will have a higher level of engagement with your audience. And I think that comes from live events, because I've done a lot of live events myself where you see presenters are feeding off of the energy of the audience. They can hear murmuring when people react. They can see when people are getting restless. They can see the body language of the people in the first few rows. Unfortunately, it's just not practical to have audio and video on 100, 1,000, however many virtual attendees you might have. So that kind of feedback that you get in a live event doesn't really translate into the virtual environment. So it's actually just as engaging to go with pre-record, because you're not going to be able to feed off that energy from the audience the same way you can in a live event, but you can put forth a pre-record that has a higher level of polish than you might have otherwise had at that live event where it has to be done live.
Yep. Sydney.
Yeah, so I will definitely add to that. One of the biggest reasons we chose to do the pre-recording from a speaker's perspective is there were so many of us. We had 13 different speakers during that week. And when you're trying to get everybody timed perfectly in that 3 hours and make sure breaks are accounted for and everybody is ready, it can make a live event very stressful just from a speaker's perspective. So being able to pre-record allowed us to have a set agenda. Cindy was able to write down the timing of each presentation, when the breaks would be, how long we would have for question and answers. And that really just made the overall event much more relaxed, less stressful. We knew when we needed to be present, ready for questions. And it just overall made us more comfortable. Smart Source did a great job walking us through the pre-recording process. It was very smooth. And like Mikey said, they had remote control of our computers that they had sent to us. So it was click on one link, go ahead and record your session. And if things needed to be changed or maybe your camera wasn't working, Smart Source is there to assist us in that, fixing those problems, which was very helpful because I am not advanced in figuring out that kind of technology. It was very easy to just sit there and let them take over and do our pre-recordings. I will add to that as well for the speaker audience out there, don't be nervous for a pre-recording. Things do happen, and kind of if you have a mistake, it still keeps it really lighthearted with your audience. When I did my pre-recording, I actually had a fly in front of my face, and I ended up swatting him away. So it just kind of brought a more relaxed atmosphere even to our audience in the live event later on.
Excellent. So we're going to move on to our second poll. And Sydney, I'm going to have you mute just so that we're getting a little bit of feedback. Somebody mentioned. Thank you. And you're next. So just a minute. Okay. When live events return, how likely is it that they will have a virtual component? Select your answer and we'll get to the results in a moment. And Kathy, I saw your question. Good question. We'll get to that in a moment as well. Sydney, you're back on. So how did you prepare for your session? And how did Smart Source help? What are some of the ways that you felt supported and set up for success? And you'll need to unmute because I just asked you to mute.
No problem. So Smart Source, like I was just stating, was very helpful. As Cindy mentioned earlier, we had them we had them attend some of our internal speaker calls. So we had the bi-weekly chats just to stay on top of deadlines, make sure any questions were answered. And having Smart Source there was really helpful. It allowed them to feel like they were part of our team. They were an outside source that we have never met before. And having them attend just made it a little more comfortable doing the pre-recordings and the live event in general. They also really helped, like I said, we did a tech rehearsal for before our pre-recording. And that was simply just to get the computer set up, make sure we had the webcam connected correctly, that the microphone was there, answer any questions we had about controlling any of the stuff on the computer or the microphone in general. And they gave us that additional confidence level. They were there to help us with anything. And so we were able to just kind of sit back and be the experts on our material and allow Smart Source to do the rest. We also chose to pair up with another speaker in the setup process. And this allowed us to review each other's slide decks and make sure that everything flowed the way that we wanted it to. We weren't missing any of the important details that we wanted to make sure we got across. And that our speaker notes in the bottom even came in handy and made sure that we weren't missing anything that we really needed to touch on. We also had a lot of deck preparation and consistency. Cindy and SmartSource both really helped us to make sure that our decks looked uniform. Having the 13 different speakers, everybody sometimes has a different layout that they have in mind, or too many words like Cindy was talking about. And using both Cindy and SmartSource allowed us to have that very nice consistency throughout the whole process.
Yeah. So another challenge event professionals face is screen fatigue, right? We've all heard about this year. So what are some tested techniques, on-screen transitions, that kind of thing, to combat this phenomenon and keep attendees engaged? And Mikey, I'm going to let you kick it off.
Sure, yeah. I do kind of have the benefit of seeing a lot of these. So during the pre-production process, a major thing I like to encourage is if your event is going to have a lot of different formats, you know, fireside chats, panels, interviews, single presentations with slide decks, I always encourage kind of mixing them all together where you kind of have one after the other and it's different formats. Because what that'll do is it'll break up what's on the screen that your attendees see. So it'll kind of maintain some of that visual interest. If your show mostly has the same format, say like a PowerPoint on the left and a camera on the right, we'll reverse that on certain sessions. You know, we'll have the camera on the right and the PowerPoint on the left, just to kind of draw people's eyes. You know, people's attention spans have never been shorter, so anything that you can do to vary up what's on the screen does seem to help.
Yep. Cindy, your thoughts?
Yeah, having that production value that SmartSource provided, I'll just add a comment to what Mikey just said. Having that production assistance is something I would have never been able to do. I wouldn't have been able to switch up the look on the screen or anything like that. So that was great that they were able to add that. So a few things that I did. One of them is that I had a slide deck running on the screen each morning so that when people joined the event in the morning before it started, there was already material running on the screen for them to look at and engage them. Some of that you're seeing on the screen now, talking about some tech stuff and reminding them how to get their PDFs and if they're having any trouble with their speakers or anything like that. And then we also had short breaks in between every session so that you're also seeing some of those slides that were shared with the audience during breaks. And it was just, there were a total of 17 breaks. So I had 17 different of these decks made up. They all had similar but different material. But all things to keep people engaged and to keep them interested and telling them, what's coming up next after the break, or, you saw the welcome in all the different languages, and this is the map that shows where everybody's from. And right, and this one is, we also had a video contest. We asked some of our customers and partners from around the globe to submit a selfie video prior to the event that asked them, what are you excited about this new product or this new product launch? And they submitted those, and we ran those during the breaks, the little 30 to 2-minute clips that people had self-recorded. And at the end of the week, we asked people to vote on their favorite video. So that was super engaging and fun and interactive. A couple of other basic tips is that most of our sessions were no longer than an hour. I think once you get to that hour mark, you really start to lose people. And then many of our sessions had multiple speakers. So similar to today, it's kind of more interesting to have different speakers and hear different voices and see different faces rather than looking at the same person the whole time. So another thing we did is that we had a countdown clock in the corner of the screen. So that helped people know how much time they had if they were going to skip a session and come back. If they didn't need to attend a certain session or during the break, they knew how much time they had until we were going to start up again. And then finally, something that was cool that we did with our China team, and it was their request, our China colleagues asked us to send over the speaker presentation decks in advance. And they took the speaker notes and translated them into Chinese so that when the presenters were on screen speaking in English, the Chinese audience could look at the speaker notes. And if they weren't quite understanding the English verbal, they could at least, see it in Chinese written, and it really helped with comprehension. And so that was a really cool idea that they came up with, and it helped with engagement for sure.
Yeah. So
those are some of our ideas.
So results from our last poll here. If live events return in the fall, how likely is it that they will have a virtual component? Neck and neck here, 44% a virtual component will be needed for main sessions, but not the entire event, or we'll need a full virtual event platform so virtual attendees can partake in the entire event. So 44% on both of those. Cindy, does that resonate with you and what your team has been talking about for the year ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. We think hybrid is not going away. Virtual is not going away, and hybrid is probably the wave of the near and far future. I think it's a good mix. It has its pros and cons. You'd lose that in-person touch for virtual, but you can sure open it up to a heck of a lot more people that you can't otherwise, that may not be able to travel or whatever various reasons. So we definitely are seeing having the same conversations. Yep.
Yeah. So before we get to your questions, I want to begin to wrap things up. And Cindy, Mikey, the 3 things you're going to repeat next time you plan a virtual event. So Mikey, from the partner perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best things that Cindy and Suez did was start early. We actually started working together about 6 months out from the event. I think there might be a perception that we kind of charge like lawyers and we charge for phone calls and emails, but we really don't. There wasn't any kind of financial consideration with starting early and being able to be flexible and work together. One of the great things about starting early was when we made the pivot to pre-record, I was able to take some time, look through the contract and speak with the powers that be here, because as I said earlier, we wanted to encourage them to pre-record, but it was going to take a little bit more time to accomplish. But because we had so much time on the front end, I was able to work it out so that we didn't charge them extra for a little bit more time to pre-record, because it would benefit us as well, because there would be less things that could go amiss. Another big thing, we did already mention this, but Cindy integrated me kind of into the team with her presenters, which is something I hadn't done before in the virtual realm. And now it's something that I do regularly. And I'm appreciative that you kind of opened my eyes to that, because I just did that yesterday. Actually, I got on with a team of presenters and kind of introduced myself and explained the process. And I think those people will feel better going forward. And then finally, always, I encourage asking every single question that you might have of us, because asking those questions also helps me, just like how pre-recording helps me. The more that I know about your event, the more that I can help translate this event into something that is what you were looking for and what you had in mind, and really reach to your audience in the new virtual world.
Cindy, how about you?
Yep. I would say the 3 things that I will always repeat. One is that I'm going to address the tech in advance, in particular with a global audience, and not knowing, or people from all over the globe having all kinds of different laptops and connections and bandwidths and equipment. So what I did was I was having visions of the morning that we got started of people emailing me and saying, I can't connect, and I can't get in, and blah, blah, blah. So that to mitigate that and to get ahead of it, I sent out some email reminders in advance, encouraging people to test their system and to test the platform before we even got started, and before, well in advance, so that they could troubleshoot and fix any of those problems in advance, that they could reach out to me beforehand, or that they could reach out to the platform tech help and get all of those things resolved, so that when we got started the morning of, they were ready to join and didn't have any issues. So that was good. I got some positive feedback on having done that, and I'll do that every time for sure. Another thing that I will always repeat is some kind of interactive component, whether it be some of the things I just showed a few minutes ago or something new. Always looking for ideas, and always will have to do something interactive, though, to keep the audience interested and keep it interesting. And then, quite frankly, the 3rd thing that I will always do is I will hire SmartSource. I can't imagine doing a virtual event without them and their support and their knowledge. So that is on my list.
Excellent. So I want to get to some of the questions that are streaming in here. Robbie asks, does SmartSource offer support for virtual exhibitors or providing a virtual exhibit hall? Is that part of your packages? Yeah.
We do. That is more the hub team's expertise, so I can't really speak at length about that. But yes, we do offer virtual exhibitors and virtual exhibit halls.
Yep. Question here from Kathy. If you're recording from your phone, what's the best green screen background app to use? Does anybody have an idea for that?
I can't say, unfortunately, that I do a lot of recording with phones, but that's a new one, and I'm going to look into that myself. That's a good question.
Good question, Kathy. Question from Chris, does SmartSource offer speaker green rooms?
Yes, we do. Variety of different ways. We can, if it's through a Zoom call, we can put them on a Zoom call on a separate audio bus. We can do it direct within our software. Yeah, we almost always have a means of communicating with speakers before or even during a session that the audience can't hear.
A question from Melanie, and this was regarding the speaker notes, some of the tips that we were talking about. Were the speaker notes available through the event platform?
No, we made the presentation decks available through the event platform, but we did not. We had removed the speaker notes from those shareable files.
Yep. Good. Let me just see if I've missed any others. Let me see. Question from Will. Who is the hub team, Mikey?
That is kind of an internal phrase. That's fair. The hub team are our event hub team, and that is a web page that sort of functions as your online virtual hub for an event, sort of like an online hotel lobby or convention center. So those are the people who build out that web page.
Yeah. I've got a couple questions here. So as we start getting back into live events, do you guys have any thoughts on when to go digital, when to go live? And this kind of, we're covering a little bit of what the poll results we're talking about here. Mikey, you want to kick that off?
Sure, that's a complicated one, and especially because we've gone through kind of a lean year in 2020. I know from live events in the past, budget was always a major consideration, and I'm sure that's not going to be any different, especially after 2020. So what I would encourage, particularly for meeting planners, would be try to put yourself in your audience's shoes and ask if this is something that I want to travel for. And if the answer is yes, and that this is something special and really that should be something in person, then maybe push that towards being an in-person event. But if it's something, especially if it's more of an internal event or if it's something more routine and less special, I would encourage making that either a hybrid with a live general session and virtual breakouts or a fully virtual event.
Yeah. Question from Ken. With hybrid live events, what's the budget breakdown between both and IYO? Do you think a single source provider would yield lower costs? Cindy, might be a good question for you, but.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Will you read it one more time for me, please?
Sure. With hybrid live events, what's the budget breakdown between both? Do you think a single source provider would yield lower costs? And maybe.
I certainly think a single source provider would yield lower costs. I can't speak for that for sure, but I think it just seems like that would be the case.
Yeah.
Working with one vendor, and that was one of the reasons why I did choose Smart Source, because they had the a la carte options. I could choose just the things that I needed, and they had the whole breadth, and they could do everything, but I didn't need everything. But yeah, I think that would help keep costs down. And then in terms of the cost breakdown from one to the other, I mean that's a tough one. It really depends on what kind of event you're thinking of for your live event. Was it going to be higher end? What kind of meals were you going to have? Were you going to fund any outings? Were you going to pay for hotel and airfare for your attendees? So you just have to weigh. You have to weigh those things. Yeah, that's the best answer that I can give to that.
And Ken, let us know if we answered that question for you. Another question. Go ahead.
I should chip in a little bit on that, particularly on single source providers. There are certain advantages where there's crossover between hybrid and virtual when you use a single vendor. So I would say that, yeah, that would generally be cheaper.
What is your opinion on doing hybrid events, as there are still going to be people who won't want to be in person, but others will? So we kind of talked about this, Cindy, a little bit ago, but what's the kind of internal debate that you're having about, attracting attendees and what their opinions are going to be this year?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to think that, in-person events are going to tend to be more memorable, a little more impact, longer term. And the hybrid events, the virtual events, they can be repurposed time and again. They can be recorded, reused. People who couldn't attend can attend and learn the material. So, yeah, those are a couple of considerations. You want to think about whether networking is important. How important is networking? Networking virtually isn't quite the same as doing it in person. And again, Mikey had said something about internal versus external. I think that's another consideration that should be thought through.
Yeah, Mikey, conversations that you're having with clients and on your team about addressing hybrid?
Yeah, It's going to be interesting as we kind of get back into the live event, because we are sort of trying to get out in front of this and figure out how we're going to best manage these events. It looks like there's going to be a need for, on-site project managers and virtual project managers. So that's a major conversation that we're having.
Yeah. Okay, one more question before we begin to wrap up here. I want to talk about measuring event results. So Cindy, can you talk about how that came into play with your virtual event? And
Yeah, sure.
I think it's a whole new space to navigate, right? Because a little bit more data to play with the virtual, right?
For sure. It's incredibly important. As we all know, we're all tasked with reporting back results of events and how they do and how they perform. So a few things that we did. One is that we asked, we did a couple of surveys. One was for the attendees. So as soon as they exited the event, there was a survey on the screen. And then we also sent a survey in the follow-up thank you email, and got some good feedback from them from that. And then we also did a survey. I did a survey with my speakers, asking them, what I could do better in the future and how I can help support them and what I might do differently next time. And then there was also quite a bit of buzz around the company, good buzz, positive buzz. So people talking about how successful the event was, especially having been our first time doing a virtual one. So those are a couple of anecdotal ways of measuring. But then the hard data is obviously through Salesforce, and pulling those reports and pulling those numbers and seeing that, for us, we're excited. There's quite a bit of demand already for our new product. It's only been a few months that it's been available on the market, but we've got some good sales already. We've got a lot in the pipeline, and our sales reps are talking about it. They're knowledgeable about it. So those hard numbers are obviously the biggest indicator of how successful your event was. And then one last piece is just that we're looking at another product launch later in the year, and our management team is talking about doing it virtual because they saw the success of this other one.
Yeah. Tough to beat those numbers or that engagement, right? And I think that's going to be an interesting debate that we have, is how you compare results and measure in-person versus virtual and what that means, right? Yeah.
Yes. Ongoing learning, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, we've gotten through all the questions. Great chat today. That's all the time that we have. A lot to think about as we move into this new era of events and partnerships. And I want to thank Cindy and Sydney from Suez for being here, and Mikey from Smart Source for sharing your partnership story and insights. We appreciate you being here, and thanks all of you for tuning in and for the great questions. This will be, of course, available on demand. So enjoy. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.